Good morning and welcome to Our Issues Milwaukee. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. Our focus this morning will be on the city of Milwaukee. It's a pleasure to have with us Milwaukee Alderman Michael Murphy, who not only represents the 10th District, he's the newly elected president of the Milwaukee Common Council. Good morning.
Good morning.
Pleasure having you here with us, and this is a great opportunity for our viewers at home to get to know more about Michael Murphy. You are the longest serving member of the current Common Council. How long, in fact, have you been in office?
25 years.
25 years. Wow, that's impressive.
Longer than you've been alive.
That's so sweet of you. Yeah. Tell us how you first became interested in politics.
You know, my parents are immigrants to this country, so they came here in 1960 from Ireland. First, my brother's born here. Mm-hmm. My parents really instilled in all their children a sense of obligation to give back to the community, and public service is something my mom and dad told me that I had an obligation. So, being Irish Catholic, we were involved in politics from a very early age, so we worked in many campaigns, and as I got older, I was always interested in it. But I did have a change, and I ended up going into a science field. I ended up getting a degree in geology.
Wow.
And worked a little bit at the Milwaukee Public Museum as a field geologist and at the Great Lakes Research Facility. But I helped a friend who ended up running for office, and then I ended up working for him while I was attending graduate school. So when he left this office, I sought it, and I was fortunate to be elected in 1989.
Very interesting, I tell you, going from
a geologist to politics.
To politics, yes.
Yeah.
And the Common Council, of course, is made up of 15 elected officials, and you were recently elected by your peers to serve as the 47th president of the Common Council. Congratulations on that. And what does that mean for you?
A lot more work. You know, the council presidency is elected by the members. Mm-hmm. And so in this case, President Hines resigned and took a new position. He did a fabulous job, and he's a good friend of mine. And as a result, there was a vacancy. And so you campaign like any campaign, and I was fortunate to get that position. And really the role and responsibility as chairman, as president of the council, is you help appoint all the committee assignments, but you also serve really as the second in command of the city. The mayor is the executive branch, we're the legislative branch. When the mayor's unable to perform his duties, I take over those responsibilities. So it's part of the job of President's Council, but really to help serve as the leader of the legislative branch of government.
Yeah, and you really put that in a nutshell. That's a great way to describe all of the responsibilities that go along with the job. And you did say that you are responsible for pretty much giving the other aldermen their chairperson positions, but you in fact chair a couple of committees yourself. Tell us about those.
I do. Currently I chair the Milwaukee Arts Board, which I've chaired that for over 10 years, and I chair the investment committee for our pension fund. I chair the Housing Trust Fund, which deals with providing resources for affordable housing. You know, I'll probably continue in some role in those capacities, along with being president of council.
Okay, and you did mention that Willie Hines resigned and he took on a position with the Housing Authority. And so basically, he held that position for 10 years.
Right.
And for you, what are your goals going into this position?
Well, I have a number of immediate goals. Certainly, one of the key goals of our community is really we need to provide a climate to attract new businesses to our city and help existing businesses. You know, job growth is important in any community, but we have a huge number of individuals in our city who have lost human potential, who are not productive in terms of working in the workforce. So connecting people to these new jobs that we want to create in our community is critical, along with improving educational opportunities for kids. And I think that's one of the goals I have, is work very closely with the new superintendent is picked by the school board, and also really working with our local universities. Another critical area, I've called for a regional summit to deal with heroin problems in our community. And one of the key issues have been crime in our community. And unfortunately, heroin has been driving a lot of that crime.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just not Milwaukee, it's the whole region. So I'm calling for all the 5 counties to come together in early May to work together and trying to find some solutions together.
Absolutely, and we have talked about the whole epidemic of heroin. We had someone from the Department of Justice come on and even had a mom talk about losing her son to a heroin overdose. And you're right, it's not just in the city, it's mainly affecting those who live in the suburban areas. But I did read that you feel like it all kind of coincides together. People travel to Milwaukee and to the suburbs to get drugs, and it's something that everybody needs to work together in order to conquer.
We do, and this crosses all demographics, all political boundaries, and we're all on the same page. And I just think it's important, both law enforcement and prevention and health, to work together to find some solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. As Common Council President, it's very important that you have a communication, an open communication with Mayor Tom Barrett, as well as Police Chief Ed Flynn. And just recently, Tom Barrett gave his State of the City address, and he talked about quite a few things, adding 120 officers to the police force, last year's number of homicides linked to violence, specifically involving black males, and then he also mentioned infant mortality. What are your thoughts on some of the things that he laid out on the table?
Yeah, so the mayor is responsible for the executive budget. He proposes the budget, legislative make changes. He had proposed 100 officers. I sponsored an amendment to add 20 additional officers. So the 120 officers are really important. The context is because we've had too many vacancies in the Detective Bureau. I think part of the problem we've had last year was the officers are responding to call to call to call. There wasn't enough officers who were in the Detective Bureau to follow up on some of these crimes.
Okay.
So filling those vacancies, I think, is really important that we going forward. You know, Chief Flynn is, I think, been one of the best chiefs that I've ever served with. He uses modern crime fighting techniques, really data-driven, in assigning officers based where crime is, and he's been very effective at that. But the problem what we've had with, you know, way too many shootings and too many homicides, specifically in African-American males, part of it's sense of hopelessness in the community, part of it's sense of the chronic problem of drugs in our community. That's why I think it's got to be connected with creating jobs and opportunities for people. You can't just use law enforcement as the only solution to the problem of fighting crime. It's very expensive. It's $33,000 to house somebody in a house of correction. I would much rather spend that money in educating people and getting them into productive jobs.
Wow, I'm so happy to hear you say that, because we've also talked about Wisconsin having the largest number of incarcerated males, and we've also talked about those high numbers of people living in poverty, and it all goes hand in hand.
You know, a crying statistic is one is in which half of the African American males by the time they're age 30 have been involved in the criminal court system. So part of the problem is if you have a criminal record, it's very hard to get a job. So how we got to change that and working towards goals of providing other opportunities for other choices, I think is really incumbent upon not just me but the community. Even if you didn't care about the issue, it's your own self-interest. It's too expensive to be housing people in prisons.
I agree with you completely, and I'm sure there are some of your constituents out there who are watching saying, that's my alderman. So again, you are representing the 10th District, and what specific area is that in Milwaukee?
Well, I have a very diverse constituency, so I represent really kind of a microcosm of the city. I go from Highway 100 where the zoo is located, all the way to 35th in Wisconsin, all the way up to 76 in Capitol. So my district is an extremely diverse district. I go from, you know, average medium income to some real tough neighborhoods and a lot of poverty, which I think is really an important thing because I get a taste of whatever thing is going on in our city.
Both sides of the
I mean, and you really got to have a perspective, and if you don't, you can get very narrow. So I got great institutional partners like the Miller Brewing Company, Miller Park, the ballpark, St. Joseph Hospital, the Milwaukee County Zoo. The reality is we have a great city, and I have had the great pleasure of representing 10th District for now 25 years.
Wow, that I can't get over that, 25 years, and you look like you're 35.
Yeah, well, thanks. I don't feel it lately.
Oh, shoot, you do have an email address where people can send you their concerns and things of that nature. What would that
That's
be?
mmurph@milwaukee.gov.
Okay, mmurph@milwaukee.gov. And you also are on Facebook. How important is social media when it comes to communicating with not only your constituents, but people?
Yeah, it's incredibly important, but you know, I'm a little past that age where I wasn't growing up with it. I have an 8-year-old little daughter and that we adopted a number of years ago. At age 4, she taught me how to use my phone, and I've really found that very helpful. So she's keeping me up to date on how to use Facebook and other things, but it's really important because so many people, young people, now get their message from the media. A short story, a young woman who was working for me at times said, "What are you doing there?" And I said, "Oh, I'm writing a check." "Oh, I never used one of those before." I said, "You never had a checkbook?" And she goes, "No." I said, "You trust everything electronically?" "Yeah."
Yeah.
I was like, "Yeah, okay."
I got teased by all my sorority sisters because we were buying something, and they said, "Use PayPal." I was like, I don't have PayPal, and they thought that's an ongoing joke. So I'm right there with you. And you have mentioned that you're involved with the Milwaukee Arts Board and things of that nature. In your opinion, in looking at other cities, what's your opinion of all of the things that Milwaukee has to offer, especially from the arts
You know, I'm
perspective?
really lucky. I married a beautiful woman who's a very talented actress, and she was a professional actress here in Milwaukee for a number of years. And people don't realize Milwaukee's depth of the arts. And we spend more per capita on arts than practically any city in the country. So one of our great strengths that we need to promote more is to really the arts in our community. And I think that's why you see many young people and empty nesters moving to downtown Milwaukee, because they want to be in the arts and the entertainment industry. So how we can encourage that industry will be a big part of my role.
All right, I like to hear that. And we have mentioned that Willie Hines resigning as Common Council President. He was also the 15th District Alderman, and with that resignation, that leaves his seat open. So there are a few names on the list of people who would be interested in taking on that position. So I'm thinking that that means there's going to be some sort of primary before we get to a special election.
Right, and when my first step as actions Common Council President, I signed to make sure that that seat and that race would be as soon as possible.
Okay.
And so it's coming up in April, Tuesday, and the reality is it's only 4 weeks away. Wow. And that's the primary, and then the general, and we'll be following up on that 6 weeks later. The reality is that the 15th District needs representation. It's an important part of our city, and I think we have a number of people who have expressed interest, and I'm sure we'll get a good candidate out of it.
Yes, I'm excited to see what goes from this point on, moving forward. And one last thing before we let you go, you did talk about actually conquering the scenario of heroin, but recently I read that you're interested in pretty much taking a look at how restaurants in the area are rated.
It's a bit controversial. The reality is that most people, foodborne illnesses is a serious problem.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people, 3,000 people died last year of salmonella. And so the reality is what we want to do is look at what other cities have done. And what they've done is they give a grade based on health inspection reports over a certain period of time. And it's helpful for the consumer, because the consumer can help drive the improvements at the restaurant. So restaurants, if they get a B or a C, really want an A. So they work harder to improve their cleanliness of their restaurant. A lot of restaurants don't want to go through that, and I understand that. But what we found in a study in California was a 15 to 20% improvement of fewer health-borne illnesses from restaurants when they had a grading system. So I'm going to listen to the industry, hear what they have to say before I put in the final legislation. But, city, we want to be on top of it. In reality, when you Yelp on social media, everybody does it. They look at restaurants, they're kind of graded now already.
Yeah.
And it's through the media, through Yelp or through TripAdvisor, whatever. Maybe we should be joining the club.
Oh, yeah, and just for my 2 cents, I'd love to see the grade in the window before I decide to eat there. So I think it's a great idea. We'll see what happens.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a pleasure talking to you. And once again, Michael Murphy, he is the newly elected president of Milwaukee's Common Council, and he's alderman of the city's 10th district. You can email Alderman Murphy at mmurph@milwaukee.gov or follow him on Facebook at ALD Michael Murphy. When we return to our Issues Milwaukee, we'll switch gears and discuss a new book that's been written on the history of the city's South Side. We'll meet author Paul Geenan right after this.